Sigmund Freud was not a popular man. Not because his ideas were wrong, but because they were precise in the most uncomfortable direction possible. Because they pointed at the interior of the human mind and said, "You are not who you think you are. You are not steering this as much as you believe. The forces operating beneath your awareness are older, more persistent, more influential than the rational self you have constructed on top of them." Most people rejected this. Most people still do. Because the alternative that our choices, our attractions, our responses, our vulnerabilities are being quietly shaped by psychological forces we cannot directly observe, is deeply threatening to the self-image of a species that has built an entire civilization on the premise of rational agency. But Freud was not interested in comfort, he was interested in precision. And among the patterns he identified across decades of clinical observation, one stands apart for its operational relevance, its presence in ordinary interactions, in professional environments, in intimate relationships. In every dynamic where one person holds influence over another, most people never recognize it in time. It's not because they aren't perceptive, but because by the time it becomes visible, it has already done most of its work. As Freud called it, transference. In its clinical definition, transference is the redirection of feelings from one relationship onto another, specifically the unconscious displacement of emotions, expectations, and relational patterns from early significant figures onto present day. It's people who trigger a similar psychological signature. In practice, it means this: you do not experience people as they are. You experience them through the accumulated architecture of every significant relationship that came before them. Every authority figure who shaped your understanding of power, every caretaker who defined what love felt and looked like, every early dynamic that wrote the foundational code for what feels safe, what feels threatening, and what feels like home. That code runs constantly, beneath awareness. Beneath the careful observations your conscious mind believes it is making. Beneath the rational assessments you trust to protect you. And the people who understand this, who understand it not as theory but as operational reality, can use it with a precision that most of their targets never see coming. The covert application of transference as an influence mechanism does not require the person using it to have studied Freud. It does not require conscious intent. It's in its most dangerous form. It operates instinctively in people who learned early that triggering specific emotional responses in others was the fastest route to getting their needs met. The mechanism works like this. The influencer reads the psychological signature of their target, often with remarkable speed and accuracy. They identify the relational archetype the target is most susceptible to: the protective authority figure, the finely understanding parent, the partner who sees what no one else has seen, the mentor who recognizes potential that everyone else has overlooked. And then they inhabit that archetype, not through explicit statement, through tone, through the specific quality of their attention, through the language they use to reflect the target back to themselves, through the creation of a relational atmosphere that feels achingly familiar, because it is triggering a response that was written long before this person arrived. The target doesn't experience this as influence. Taste as connection, as recognition. Taste as the relief of finally being understood by someone who operates at the right frequency. By the time the pattern becomes visible, by the time the inconsistencies accumulate enough to demand examination, the emotional architecture has already been constructed. The transference has already made the relationship feel significant in a way that has nothing to do with who the person actually is, and everything to do with who they unconsciously reminded you of. Transference-based influence is among the most detection-resistant patterns in the full spectrum of covert manipulation for a specific reason. It doesn't feel like something being done to you. It feels like something happening in you, like an internal response, like chemistry, like the inexplicable sense of knowing someone immediately, of feeling safe before safety has been earned, of feeling seen before visibility has been offered. The defenses that would normally activate around a stranger, the skepticism, the measured distance, the careful observation before trust, do not activate, because the emotional brain has already processed this person through the lens of the familiar. It's familiar to the emotional brain means safe, means known, means the defenses can rest. This is Freud's most operationally important insight, that the past doesn't stay in the past. It travels with us, fully portable, fully active, coloring every new face with the emotional palette of every significant face that came before it. The person exploiting this doesn't need to earn your trust. They only need to remind you below the level of conscious recognition of someone who already had it. The antidote to transference-based influence is not suspicion. It is not the construction of higher walls or more aggressive skepticism. It is what Freud spent his career building towards: self-knowledge. The specific, uncomfortable, precise kind of self-knowledge that requires you to examine not just who someone is, but what they are activating in you, and where that activation originates. When a connection feels immediate and inexplicably significant, ask what it reminds you of, not who it reminds you of. What dynamic, what feeling, what relational atmosphere from an earlier chapter of your life is being echoed in this present tense interaction? That question creates a gap, a moment of conscious observation between the emotional response and the behavioral compliance that would normally follow it automatically. In that gap lives your agency. Freud understood that you cannot eliminate the unconscious. You cannot simply decide to stop being shaped by the past, okay? But you can develop enough self-awareness to recognize when the past is steering, and in that recognition, claim enough of the present to make a different choice. The pattern never recognized in time is not unrecognizable. It is simply unfamiliar, until now. You have the language. The gap is yours. If you found this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for visiting the underground. Till next time.